I'll go ahead and get started. As Sarah mentioned, welcome everyone. This is the first iteration of a three-part series of a Safe Routes to School 2023 grant overview for the funding cycle that's coming up here in the state of Illinois. So we previously did this same webinar series, similar webinar series, I should say, for the 2021 grant cycle. And we've also done this twice for the 2020 and 2022 transportation enhancements webinar cycles. And we've gotten a lot of really good feedback. So hoping this one serves the purpose and gets you all the information you need to write a really high quality and successful proposal. Next slide. We are being recorded, so you can go back and view it at your leisure later if you miss something. Everybody's automatically muted. Obviously, if you have questions, please put them in the Q&A box versus the chat. We will be trying to run through all of those at the end of the session. We've allowed a liberal amount of time to try and get to everything. And if you've been a part of these sessions at all previously, you'll know that we do a pretty good job of getting to everybody, and our dear friends from the Illinois Department of Transportation are on the line to answer those questions. And for those of you who've used Zoom in the past, closed captioning is available in the settings. So just to give you an idea of who's on the line and who your presenters are today, I am Melody Geraci. I'm the Deputy Executive Director of the Active Transportation Alliance. My partner in crime is Maggie Sherwinski, who's the Director of Community Building and Leadership. And Active Transportation Alliance is a nonprofit membership-based organization that advocates for better walking, biking, and public transportation, because we really do believe that it creates better, healthier, more sustainable, more equitable communities for everybody. The other partners on the call are the Illinois Public Health Institute, and more broadly, the Illinois Alliance to Prevent Obesity. And that's because it might be maybe feeling a little bit non-traditional to have public health people involved in a transportation program, but it's not so unusual if you consider the fact that physical activity and physical inactivity and air quality and related respiratory disease are some of the biggest threats to people's health. And so it's in the best interest of the public health community to encourage people to be able to walk and bike more frequently. And as you can see, it's one of the 4 pillars of the iSpan program. iSpan is a 5-year initiative that's funded by the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, and it is led by our friends at IPHI. And it's the reason we're here today. As part of the initiative, one of the things that we're trying to do is get more money and resources, especially to lower income and rural communities, the folks that don't often get maybe a bite at the apple for some of these great funding programs. So Active Trans is the built environment technical assistance provider on this project. And so here we are, happy to be here today. The built environment goal, as I just mentioned, of iSpan is to connect activity-friendly routes to everyday destinations by improving walking, biking, and transit systems. And that's essentially the definition of Safe Routes to School. It's trying to enable and encourage kids to be able to safely walk and bike to and from school for their trip. So this fits right in. And again, we are on part 1 of a 3-part webinar series today. Our next webinar will be on the 23rd of August. The third one will be September 20th. And we've spaced these out very intentionally so that, right now we're sort of at the beginning-ish of the grant cycle. The grant proposal period has opened, but, and then we'll get a little further along, closer, middle of the the cycle, and then September 20th will be right before proposals are due in the beginning of October. And today we're going to spend most of the time on running over the grant process in detail. And the second two sessions will be spent entirely on Q&A with IDOT, because again, we got incredible amounts of positive feedback as to the level of helpfulness, because we can really get into the weeds with each of your individual questions about, oh my gosh, I'm so confused about this part of the proposal, or am I allowed to write in this, or would this be eligible, etc. So we'll look forward to seeing you all for all three. So our agenda today is, again, we're going to do an overview, and we're especially going to focus on what's new in 2023. So anyone who's participated previously in previous funding cycles, we really just want to hit the highlights of what's new. We will not, of course, ignore the rest of the process. We're gonna go over all of it. There's a new part. One of the new parts that we're going to really hit on today is the non-infrastructure elements of the funding program. This is new, and we'll talk about that in detail. We'll go over proposal scoring to a degree, and then we'll also talk about the required collateral documents and just some helpful tips and tricks on getting prepared. Okay, and Maggie, am I turning it over to you here?
Yeah, thanks, Mel.
Yeah.
All right, so hi everyone. So I'm going to give you a brief overview of the Safe Routes to School program. So this is a biannual program. So as Melody mentioned, the last one was in 2021. So it's on odd years, and it's administered by the Illinois Department of Transportation. The money comes from federal funding. And this year, $6 million is available in funding, and the call for proposals will open August 1st. So you have a few weeks before it's open. So it's great that you're here and starting to think about this, and it'll be open for a couple months, closing October 2nd. So next slide. So a little bit of a background. So this program, Safe Routes to School, originated in Europe in the 70s, but it didn't come to the US until 2005, when it was included in a federal transportation bill. So this most recent cycle, 2023, is funded through the bipartisan infrastructure law, through the Transportation Alternative Set-Aside program, as well as Highway Safety Improvement Program money. And we'll make sure to have these resources available and sent out to all of you. But two great resources to look towards are the Safe Routes National Partnership and the National Center for Safe Routes to School. And they might have some great ideas for you as you're working on your application. But so what's new this year? So as Melody mentioned, there is going to be both infrastructure grants available, as well as non-infrastructure grants available. So infrastructure would be more the engineering type projects, which we saw was the only type of project you could apply for in the last cycle, but now it's you can apply for non-infrastructure projects. The program is reimbursable. So that means that the sponsor has to provide the costs up front, and then IDOT reimburses you. This year, you'll be reimbursed 100% of the grant amount, because the program is being 100% federally funded, which is a great news. So no local match required this year. Program goals, it's to encourage children to walk and bike to school, including those with disabilities. It's to make it safer to walk and bike to school, encouraging healthy, active lifestyles in children. And then this year, it is projects can be within 2 miles of a primary school, a middle school, or a high school. So this is also a new development. So previously, this program had always been for K through 8, so elementary and middle school, and now it also includes high school. So we're also excited about that addition. So next slide. And then this is just a few examples of some projects that were awarded funding in 2021, so the last cycle. And you can see that the types of projects could be new sidewalks, crosswalks, ramps, ADA improvements, rapid flashing beacons, signage. So there's a number of different types of engineering projects that are eligible for funding. And again, we'll go into those in more detail. But last time there were 57 projects that were awarded funding. So next slide. And this is just a brief glossary of some acronyms we might be using, or you might see these on some slides. We'll try to say that the actual names when we talk about them, but these are also on our website, and we'll be posting the webinar recording and the slide deck on our website, and I'll add that website to the chat soon, so you have access to that. Next slide. So eligibility, and next slide. There are two types of grants available, as we've mentioned. There are the infrastructure projects, which again are more engineering focused, crosswalks, bike lanes, sidewalks. But now there are also the non-infrastructure projects, which are more oriented towards education, towards programming and encouragement. So some examples of that could be classroom instruction, organizing an event to promote walking and biking, or starting a crossing guard program. So a few key requirements for both of those types of programs are projects need to be within 2-mile radius of a K through 12 school. And again, it's a reimbursable grant program. So that means the project sponsor pays the relevant costs up front and then works with IDOT to get reimbursed. IDOT this year is allowing one infrastructure application and one non-infrastructure application per school campus. And this is a bit of an adjustment from previous years, but a school campus is loosely defined as a cluster of schools within a compact geographic area. So generally that means that one application for each grant type is allowed per school district, but in some cases for larger communities, that could mean that you could apply for more than one grant type per school district. So you should check in with IDOT, with John and Kelly, and you're welcome to ask more questions about this later. But so if you might fall into that category and you're looking to apply for more than one grant of each type. And then another change that we want to make sure you're aware of is about GATA. So previously GATA was required for everything for everyone. This year there's a slight adjustment. So for infrastructure projects, GATA is required except for local public agencies. So that would be municipalities, counties, and townships. So infrastructure projects, GATA is not required for those local agencies. For the non-infrastructure projects, unfortunately this year, GATA is still required for all applications. So we'll be repeating that just to make sure that's clear. But that's the new guidelines for this cycle. So next slide. And a few other key requirements. So if you are in an MPO or a regional planning commission, your project should be in your MPOs or RPC's TIP, your transportation improvement program, if you're awarded funds. Also, your project needs to comply with federal and state requirements, such as the MUTCD and the Americans with Disabilities Act. Scope and funding changes, the requests that increase the amount of funding awarded can't be approved. So you can't ask for more funding. And if you don't use all of your funds, you have to return those funds back to the Safe Routes to School program. So you can't use those for a different project. Next slide. All right, so now we're gonna dig a little bit more into the infrastructure projects, and then I'll turn it over to Melody to talk more about the non-infrastructure projects. So the infrastructure projects, again, are engineering focused projects like crosswalks, you've seen these photos, bike lanes, sidewalks. Next slide. And these projects again can be at both public and private schools, K through 12, so elementary, middle school, or high school this year. As for who can be the application sponsor, so one note about a sponsor, the sponsor has to administer the project. So you're the one working with IDOT, and you're going to act as the fiscal agent for the project, and you'll put forth those initial funds for the project. So typically for infrastructure projects, the local government is the sponsor. So this could be municipalities, again, counties, townships, schools, and school districts can also be the sponsor. I think in the last cycle, there was one school district that was awarded funding, and they were the main sponsor. So it could either be local government or school districts, but it's typically the local government. And next slide. Oh, and then also, sorry, I should note that the local government and the schools will, no matter what, need to work closely together as you're developing the grants and as you're administering the funds. So next slide. Yeah. So a few requirements for the infrastructure program. So the maximum award amount is $250,000. The minimum award amount is $25,000. And again, it is 100% funded. So no local match required this year. So very exciting. Construction and construction engineering are what are eligible expenses. Preliminary engineering, which would be phase 1 and phase 2 engineering, as well as acquiring right-of-way, those costs are not eligible. So you might, like, a lot of projects don't need that right-of-way acquisition. So if it is needed, that needs to be completed before you submit your application. For the preliminary engineering, so phase 1 engineering, phase 2 engineering, these types of projects, the engineering is usually is more simplistic, but that should be completed within 6 months of when the awards are announced. And there is, like, in some cases, that might be difficult depending on what district you're in. So you just need to be working closely with your local IDOT district to see about, so that they're aware of your timeline. So a few other timeline requirements to keep in mind. So once awards are announced, funds must be obligated within 18 months, and construction should be completed by the end of 3 years. And then again, just to repeat, the GATA requirement. So GATA is required for all infrastructure projects or applications except for local public agencies. So that, again, municipalities, counties, townships do not need to fill out all of the GATA forms for infrastructure projects. Next slide. And then briefly, I'm just going to talk about the types of projects that are available for funding. So one is sidewalk improvements. That would be a new sidewalk, a sidewalk repair, filling in some gaps, widening a sidewalk, adding curbs, curb ramps to a sidewalk. Next slide. Traffic calming measures are eligible. So that would be speed bumps, humps, tables, a raised crossing, a pedestrian island, like you can see in this photo, a narrow traffic lane. Next slide. And then traffic control devices, such as an upgraded traffic signal, new pavement markings or striping, rapid flashing beacon, actuation devices for bikes or pedestrians, a countdown signal, permanent mounted solar powered speed feedback sign. And those, I should just say, again, we're going to be posting these slides on our website, and also IDOT will be releasing guidelines for this new cycle, and all of this information will be in the guidelines. So you can either refer to the slides or the guidelines just to make sure you're applying for something that is allowable. So next slide. Crossing improvements are also eligible. So that could be a crosswalk, that median refuge island, a raised crossing, like shown in this picture, sight distance improvements around an intersection. Next slide. And then bike facilities such as a new bike lane or an upgraded bike lane, maybe a buffered bike lane, a cycle track, widened shoulders, and then other things like pavement markings or signage, realigning the roadway. Next slide. And then side paths, trails are eligible, as well as bike parking facilities. So bike racks, bike shelters, or lighting to improve safety around the bike parking area. Next slide. And then one thing to mention that's not allowable for infrastructure projects is portable speed feedback trailers. The permanent ones are allowed, but the portable ones are not. Next slide. And now I'll pass it back to Melody to talk about the non-infrastructure projects.
Thanks, Maggie. Yep, so let's go through these. Non-infrastructure projects can most simply be thought of as programs. Nothing that impacts the built environment, so nothing that, you know, touches concrete or puts a hole in the ground. The eligibility around the non-infrastructure program is, again, grades K through 12, so including high schools and including public schools. The sponsor needs to be a school or a school district, a local government that has roadway jurisdiction, municipalities, counties, townships. It can also be, now this is new and different than the infrastructure program. So it can be a metropolitan planning organization or a regional planning commission. It can be a council of government. It can be a local, regional, or state agency, such as a health department or a police department, a nonprofit organization, so a PTO or a PTA, a community-based organization, a youth center, for example, a health, a health agency or health organization. And the other note, back one slide, please. And then the note is that the sponsor, whoever's sponsoring the non-infrastructural grant, will administer the project and act as the fiscal agent. So just keep that in mind, once again, that whoever the sponsor of the project is will be the one responsible for fronting the cost. So that's a big deal for some school districts and community-based organizations, sometimes health departments that are not perhaps accustomed to reimbursement style grants where they're asked to front the money. A lot of, especially nonprofits, are used to getting all the money up front. So keep that in mind when you're deciding who might sponsor your project. Okay. So some of the key requirements include an award maximum of $100,000, an award minimum of $2,500. And then there's a subcategory in the non-infrastructure side of things for structured mini grants. And we're going to go over that. So think of this in that there are two types of non-infrastructure grants you can go for. One that you come up with, it's your own like self-designed, education or encouragement program. Those award maximums are 100,000, minimums are 2,500, or you can apply for one of these structured mini grants that IDOT has outlined, and they're kind of more of like a package deal, and those maximums are 25,000. GATA, again, is required for all non-infrastructure applications, and the sunset for non-infrastructure programs is at the end of the completion of a single school year. So, for example, if IDOT announces grant awards next spring, in the spring of 2024, then you would have one full school year from that point to complete your project. So you will never be asked, for example, to start and finish a non-infrastructure project in the middle of a school year. You'll always be given from the beginning to the end of a full school year. Okay, next slide. The types of projects we're talking about, there is no shortage of resources out there the two websites that Maggie mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, Safe Routes to School National Partnership and the National Center for Safe Routes to School, have boatloads of resources. Excuse me. And we will also at the Active Transportation on activetrans.org/safe routes to school webpage on our website, we will also have links to some things. But think of it as educating and encouraging, basically. Kids, parents, neighbors, drivers, anyone involved in the kind of the traffic environment around a school to do so safely and conveniently. So they can be in the realm of enforcement, for example, educating parents about laws around school zone laws, cell phone laws, for example. Put down the cell phone for the love of God. Education programs for kids about helmet safety, encouragement. You could have little modest incentive programs to encourage kids to walk and bike to school. You could spend money on evaluation. You could do a small study of the traffic conditions around your school, or you could pay to do a large, attitude or opinion survey of walking and biking around the school. And then there's these structured mini grants, which we're going to get into in a minute. The types of costs that are eligible: equipment and supplies, educational materials, printing, promotions, incentives, publicity, so buying ads or ad space, planning and evaluation. So if you needed to hire maybe a local university or somebody to do some research or planning for you, or you wanted to actually write a plan, a school travel plan, for example, you could spend the money on that activity. Education and training. So if you wanted to do bike rodeos or walking training programs or crossing guard training programs, and then printing and copying, that kind of thing. Go ahead. So we're going to go through each of these E's very quickly. Enforcement. Again, examples would be crossing guard training programs, parent or student patrol programs, equipment for the same. So this is a very kind of a popular area for folks to that districts and others apply for. Not just the uniforms, but having a really kind of rigorous training program for your crossing guards, beefing up their supplies and their equipment, high visibility vests, and high quality handheld stop signs. Same thing for student patrols if that's something you're interested in. Also, like an education program for parents about laws. Then education stuff about is generally around the safety and ability to walk and bike safely. So materials, booklets, coloring books, videos, etc. Bicycle rodeos, which is pictured here. Those are basically just, doing a little fake traffic scenario with kids and teaching them how to ride safely. Personal safety skills. So that would be how to be safe as a human, as a person in the environment. So not just with regard to traffic, but with regard to things like bullying or, strangers, etc. Educating parents and caregivers about safe driving procedures I mentioned, and other kinds of training workshops. Encouragement, again, incentivizing the choice or the ability to walk and bike to school. Modest rewards, so little prizes, having a walk or bike to school day event. There is lots of information online about how to do one of those. Hosting a walking school bus or a bike train, so that's organized groups led by an adult or a trusted older high school person to lead groups of kids to and from school by foot or by bike. Starting a mileage club with maybe a little punch card, or getting a small reward for every 10 miles that you walk or something like that, so on and so forth. An evaluation, again, doing the kind of research that you need to do in order to do the encouragement and the education, because if you don't know where the routes are, if you don't know what the hazards are, if you don't know what people in the community think about walking and biking, then it's going to be a little bit harder to be successful in your efforts. So the examples shown here is an evaluation, a school travel plan that was done for the village of Glencoe. You can see a map, a walking route map. And then there's a sidewalk inventory sheet that was done for the village of Murfreesboro, or the city of Murfreesboro. So you can use that to pay for a full-blown plan, a corridor plan, measurement tools, ways to measure perceptions of safety, photocopying, postage, if you're mailing out a survey, etc. The last E's are equity and engagement. So this is shining a light on making certain that you are reaching out to the most affected populations in your school community and making sure that their voices are being heard, that you're servicing them, that you're making sure that they are being prioritized in everything that you're doing. So if you need extra resources to reach out to, historically underserved communities within the areas within the community, folks that don't answer surveys, folks that don't have the internet, if you would like to do a focus group with those people, if you would like to, pay a high school student to go to worship services on the weekend to ask about those things. More community-wide events, if you wanted to have a traffic safety fair or something in a rural community. Costs for organizing a committee. So maybe you would like to put together a school safety committee. Doing walk audits on the topic of overall safety, not just traffic safety. Once again, there are all kinds of different interpretations of the word safety depending on the community that you're in. So those types of events are fundable. So be creative. So the packaged mini grants that we were talking about. So IDOT has put together a handful of different categories. If you're don't quite know exactly what you want to do with a non-infrastructure grant, this might be a really great way to go. So it's kind of pre-packaged. It covers pre-event costs, day of event costs, post-event materials for specific activities, $25,000 max. Let's go to the next slide. So here are the 5 categories. One is a walk and roll to school day or a bike and roll to school day event. And once again, I'm not going to go into detail about that, but it's basically a one-off, celebration where you would, get a whole bunch of kids together, walking together, led by adults, and then you have some sort of a festival or something at the school. Bike rodeos or bike safety clinics, that would be, you fund materials for bike inspections, safety inspections, fixing kids' bikes up, replacing brakes, pedals, things like that, helmet fittings, setting up a course. Number 3 is pedestrian bicycle personal safety. So that's kind of the safety in your environment. Often police departments do these sorts of things around bullying and, being safe when you're walking to and from school, things like that. Pop-up traffic garden, which is what's pictured over here on the right. It could be temporary, it could be permanent. They're very cool ideas that you could, for not too much money, you could take, preserve a little spot in maybe your school grounds if you have some extra space near your ball fields or something, and pave a little area and permanently paint these little safety towns, so that you can take kids out there all year and for years to come to practice traffic safety skills. And then, as we mentioned, crossing guard training. So these are the 5 categories. If you wanted to go for more money, you got to kind of, put in the work to come up with your own program. which could be any of these things. But if you'd prefer to kind of, just get your feet wet, maybe for the first time, if you're unfamiliar with the non-infrastructure programs, this might be an easier way to go. Next slide. Okay, here's our giant don't do this graphic, which is amazing. So what's not eligible is operational costs. We cannot pay for people's staff time. We can't pay to hire people, salaries, overhead. You can pay for, volunteer costs. So, if you need t-shirts for your volunteers, or you need to rent a meeting space or something like that, but you just can't pay people. We can't pay for food or beverages. That's the rule for any federal money. We are not going to spend money on making it easier for people to drive, to pick up and drop off their kids. That is not the goal. Safe routes to school. We're also not spending money on school bus safety and bus stop improvements. That's a different type of school transportation. Very important, very valid, but a different program altogether and different sources of money for that. And then again, the portable type of speed feedback trailers. And this would be a infrastructure project anyway, but if you wanted to do speed feedback signs, they need to be in the ground and permanent. Okay, Maggie, you're up.
Yeah, thanks, Mel. And that red image is a little jarring, isn't it? I'll try to get rid of that or improve it. But okay, so proposal scoring. So thinking about your scoring criteria. So projects or applications will be reviewed independently by several IDOT staff. And on this slide and the next slide, there are criteria listed here that will be considered equally. So that would be, what is your general focus of your project? What's the need of your project? What are hazards and barriers? What's the potential for improving walking and biking, and what and a detailed cost estimate. And then other criteria is looking at community support, confirming the status of your preliminary engineering and right-of-way acquisition if it's needed, your previous Safe Routes to School award performance. And I do want to say, just like in general, so your application, so you're going to be writing a narrative. It's not that long, but it's your chance to really sell your project. So you're going to want to clearly explain, what is your focus area? Why is it important? What are you trying to overcome? What steps have you taken? How will it improve safety? How will it encourage kids to walk or bike to school more? So it's, really try to dig in and think about all of the needs. And even if you're the one writing the narrative, have someone else look at it and, and involve others in brainstorming. Really, there are often multiple needs, and really take the time to showcase that in your narrative. To improve your scoring. Regarding the detailed cost estimates that are required, IDOT and district engineers will be evaluating that information from your application, and IDOT heavily weighs accurate cost estimates for projects. So it's very important to have your engineering department involved or your public works department involved to really think through project feasibility and all costs associated with it. That will make a big difference in your overall score. And then also, we keep hearing from IDOT staff that it's really important to show community support. Not everyone does that in their applications. And can you go back to the last slide? So not everyone does that, but it's important to document that as much as possible in your application, and really invite community members to participate as you're putting your application together, providing input, getting their voices into the application is a really great idea to improve your scoring. And then also on this slide, enrollment data. So enrollment data from the Illinois State Board of Education will automatically be considered for your scoring. So that would be the number of low-income students that your project will serve and the number of disabled students. So you don't need to collect that data yourself. IDOT will grab that, but that will be considered. So next slide. And just a few additional tips that we heard from when we spoke to IDOT about the program. So it's really important to think about, for infrastructure projects, to think about what's going on at the front door of a school. So like, can kids get to that front door? Like, is there some issue of crossing the street there? Like, is a crosswalk needed, for example? So address school site access issues first. How do people get directly to the school, and then move outward from there? So really think about the footprint of the school and getting there. It will help your score if you submit both an infrastructure application and a non-infrastructure application. So submitting both is highly recommended. And again, just to reiterate, that showing community support is really helpful and will be beneficial to your score. And then for non-infrastructure projects, just thinking about who could be involved in your project and like mentioning that in your narrative, but thinking about potential volunteers. And I know that at a lot of schools, teachers are already quite busy. So thinking about other potential volunteers who can help run some of those programs, like parents or even high school students who need service hours. So they're often a great resource to tap into, or other community members. The next slide. So now just gonna go over what you need to include in your application. Next slide. One is the narrative. So there will be a link to the application on IDOT's Safe Routes to School page, and I don't think that's there yet. But again, this grant opens August 1st, so that's you'll be able to access it by then. So a resolution of financial commitment is needed, and a letter of support is needed from the sponsoring roadway authority. So who owns that road, they need, and who's the sponsor. You're going to need both a resolution and a letter of support. And that in that resolution, you'll need to, the government will need to say, like, or the sponsor will need to say, we're willing to pay for any ineligible items or costs that go over the grant award. But of course, like that grant award, there is no local match commitment needed. But if you go over the amount, there needs to be some type of commitment. And then a resolution or a letter of support is needed from the local school district. If your project is on or intersects a state road, you'll need to get a letter of allowance from IDOT, and you should get started on that as soon as possible. So contact your IDOT district local roads engineer or office, and you need to do that again if your project is on or intersects a state road. And then you'll need that detailed cost estimate, so that's something worth working on as soon as possible as well. And then finally, what's required is parent surveys and student tallies. So this data is preferable, like you could have data collected from last school year, so 2022 to 2023, or you could look at data from September 2023. So again, this grant is due October 2nd. So you'll have at least a month of September to collect data. And usually you just need a few days worth of data. And IDOT is looking for a summary of the results, not all of the details. And next slide. So there are a few ways that you can collect this data. So on IDOT's website, they have downloads to some paper, it's a PDF, but it's a tally sheet and these parent surveys about arrival and departure and just about how kids get to school that you can print out and pass out to students and parents, and that's available in English and Spanish. There's also an online tool at saferoutesdata.org from the National Center for Safe Routes to School that can help you with online data collection, and it will also help you with visualization and summarizing the data. And then as another alternative, we took the IDOT's tally sheet and survey and put them in a Google form. So I am happy, if you email me, Maggie@activetrans.org, I'm happy to provide you instructions on how to use that Google form. You'll have to copy it, and then you can use it to email it out to parents and teachers. So feel free to email me. And next slide. So GATA, back to GATA. So GATA, I know there was a question about what is GATA. So it's the Grant Accountability and Transparency Act, and it's just kind of showing that you're in good standing to receive federal state money. And so there's a website, grants.illinois.gov.portal, that you can go to create an account if you don't have one already. We're not experts in GATA, so I would encourage you, if you need to start GATA and get some documents put together, email dot.gata@illinois.gov if you have questions. But there are 4 documents required. All of those links are on the IDOT Safe Routes to School webpage. And again, just it's required, those 4 documents are required for infrastructure projects, unless you are a local public agency like a municipality. But for non-infrastructure applications, everyone has to fill out GATA in those forms. So next slide. And then some other documents you can include or in your application to help strengthen the case for why your projects should be funded. Getting more letters of support from project partners like parent teacher groups, from local school councils, from nonprofits, from other community groups, from law enforcement, from businesses, from public health agencies. Just think of who's in your community and reach out. Other supporting documents, you could have photos, you could have findings from a walk audit, which means that you're taking a group of people and walking, around the school and figuring out like, oh, like here's an issue and here's an issue, and you're documenting what you're finding, what would be helpful to make it safer for people to walk. You could have maps, and then also IDOT on their website, they have a few worksheets that might be helpful for documenting walkability and bikeability around the school. So they have some checklists, and they also have a stakeholder interview sheet, which has questions that you could ask stakeholders and involve more people in the project. And next slide. For submitting your application, so you can submit it electronically, which is great to see. So applications are due on Monday, October 2nd at 4:30 p.m. Central Time. Hard copy is not required. So you can submit those. Well, there will be more information about how to submit on the IDOT website later on, but awards are expected to be announced spring of next year, so spring of 2024. And next slide. And with that, I will pass it back to Melody to provide a few general tips.
Thanks, Maggie. Let's go to the next slide. So the first tip is, if you don't know who your local IDOT contact is, do it. Do it as soon as possible. Most municipalities, counties, townships, folks that have roadways under their jurisdiction and are responsible for them know this already. But if you're a school district or someone else that doesn't typically interact, maybe with your local IDOT district, do that. So you're seeing a map there on the right, and there's a link to discover which one is yours, and then call that office and ask to speak with somebody in the local roads department, and they will start a relationship with you about a potential proposal. Other tips. So even if you aren't quite sure what you're going to do ultimately, start collecting some letters of support. You know, you can say things like, you know, look, PTA, we are thinking of doing a proposal for a Safe Routes to School project. Could you lend your support, and we'll provide you some language saying, you know, we support this because we want our kids to be safe. Demonstrates a community support. So if you haven't taken that important step, again, Maggie stressed how important it is for your project scoring. Go ahead and start doing that. Send out some, I know it's you're in the middle of the summer here, but plan for early in the fall of 2023 to do some of those tallies, those surveys, download those materials and have those ready to go, so that you can get those out early in the beginning of the year. Start crafting your needs statement. You don't need to know what your project is specifically necessarily to say, hey, you know, we only have 3, you know, we have a very walkable neighborhood. We have, you know, 70% of our students live within a mile of school. But you could say we have a major arterial that children and parents are afraid to cross. So, you know, that kind of thing. So just start wrapping your head around how you're going to make the case for your proposal. Start collecting that collateral data, the traffic studies, the crash data, health information, you know, levels of obesity and respiratory disease and things that are related, air quality data. And you should easily be able to get some of that from either your local Department of Transportation, your county DOT. IDOT has crash data. Police department may have some crash data, especially talking about bicycle and pedestrian crashes, but also car-on-car crashes, because that's an indication of a lack of safety for kids to be in that environment, period. And then if you don't have an engineering partner that you're ready to use, start figuring out who that might be. And if you want to refer back to that list of engineering, and we have arrived at the end of the presentation section. Woohoo! We are now going to flip to the Q&A, and I'm excited to say that we've been answering, our IDOT friends have been answering many of the questions live in the Q&A box. So if you are able and you can flip to the Q&A box, I'm going to start at the top, and I'm simply going to reiterate what was asked and what was answered. And if we need to elaborate at all, if the question was not answered to your satisfaction or you need more clarification, please go ahead and re-enter your question in the Q&A box, and we'll just keep ticking off as things get added onto the bottom. All right, so the first question was, is this being recorded? And the answer is yes. Next question from Joseph. Can a private school apply? The answer is yes. Private schools are eligible. Another question was, there's a teen center that's looking to create a safe route to and from their center from a middle school that's within 2 miles of their location. Would that qualify? And we answer that question a little bit further down, but the answer is that the teen center could be an applicant, but you absolutely would need to coordinate with the school or the school district, and it would be an excellent idea also to coordinate with the perhaps the municipality or whoever owns the roads that are most implicated in the connection between the teen center and the middle school. So I guess what I'll say on that is that the primary point of any application needs to be getting students from their homes to school and back. If there is a destination in the midst of that, if there's a teen center or a child care center, where students, or a YMCA, where kids are going to and from that, either home to the YMCA for before school care, or from school to the teen center for after school activities, all the better, right? But there really does need to be this connection between the trip to and from school, from home. So, but yeah, absolutely. Explore that, see what you can put together, but get a nice collaboration together with yourself and those other entities. All right, next question. What the heck is GATA? We tried to answer that a little bit more in detail, added some links, and IDOT went into pretty deep detail about what GATA is at their recent Special Programs Assistance Conference, and that link to those slides is there in the answer. So I suggest you go there for real. GATA is probably one of the shared points of frustration for everybody. It's not anybody's fault. It's just one of those things that can be very complicated. So next question is that a community has a traffic calming device, a speed limit and radar sign, which they've already purchased and is being installed this week. Can they get reimbursed for that after installation if they were to get a grant? And the answer is no, you cannot do that. You need to, the only thing that you can be funded for is for forward moving projects that would begin after grant award and finalization. Next question, are street lighting projects along a sidewalk or a path or along a road eligible? And absolutely, the answer is yes. Pedestrian level lighting, so we're not talking about highway, 40-foot poles that would light a highway, but pedestrian scale lighting absolutely are eligible. Next question from Barbara. Would funding for a school district-wide bike route plan be eligible? Answer is yes. And Kelly Larimore from IDOT is offering to answer questions directly. So please reach out to Kelly if you have like more specificity that might not be appropriate for this setting. Next question, under non-infrastructure, are staff salaries for putting together materials, etc., eligible? And we covered that. The answer is no, can't pay for people time. Next question, if one applied for a bike rodeo or a similar event, same question, can internal staff time is reimbursable for police officers? The answer is no, unfortunately. Next question, if the project is on a state route, is an IDOT letter of support needed? The answer is definitely. Definitely, especially if your project involves a state route. Reach out to your local IDOT district, especially because there's a possibility that road is scheduled for improvements or updates or reconstruction anyway in the state's transportation improvement plan, right? So if it's already, in the hopper for, so to speak, or it's already queued up for, you wouldn't want to waste grant money on it. You could just work with IDOT to see what's possible for integrating your ideas for pedestrian and bicycle improvements. And for a whole bunch of other reasons, this is a really critical thing to reach out to IDOT if there's a state route involved. Next question, if you have two schools within a half a mile from each other, can one apply for two infrastructure and two non-infrastructure grants, one for each district? Correct. The answer is yes. Even though they're so close together and might, under other circumstances, be considered like kind of a school campus-ish, they're not, because they're different school districts. So two different districts would require two separate applications. The next question is the student tally list. About the student tally list, does it need to be done daily or just one time when school starts? And the answer is the way that the tally is set up is that you do it for 3 days in a row, I think is usually the way you do it, or you could do 3 days in a week. And that's enough. And next question is about streetlights again. Would street lighting that also lights the path be eligible? It will pay for pedestrian and bicycle lighting, but not street lighting once again. Now, you know, I live, you know, in a place where my street lights are pedestrian scale, if that makes sense. I live on a residential road that is low speed, and the street lights that we have are very low to the ground and they light both. So I would suggest reaching out to IDOT if you're not quite sure what that looks like. The question is, how do I contact you? And Kelly has helpfully put her email address in here, kelly.larimore, Larimore, and the number 2 @illinois.gov. Next question. If you applied and received a grant from Safe Routes to School, Safe Routes to Parks, can you apply for this grant as well? Hey, Rochelle, nice to see you here. The Safe Routes to Parks project, I don't think is an Illinois, a state government grant, if I'm thinking correctly. I think that's through the Safe Routes to School Safe Routes to School National Partnership. That's a private nonprofit organization. So I don't think they're related at all. So, but Kelly is going to definitely look into it for you. Another question. If through the physical or the preliminary engineering process, it's determined that right-of-way or easements are needed, how is that handled? Kelly's answer is this would be a discussion that you could have with your local roads engineer, and that communications with Safe Routes staff in your local district is essential for this kind of a thing. So we had mentioned that right-of-way is not eligible to be funded through the Safe Routes grant program. So you cannot include that in your cost, the acquisition of right-of-way or easements. But talking to the local IDOT district office, you know, might help you find a solution, I guess. Next question. If an applicant submits both an infrastructure and a non-infrastructure application, would they be eligible for the 250,000 max and the 100,000 max for each application? The answer is if both are submitted, they'll be evaluated on each of the application's individual merits. And yes, the max amounts for both are listed there, and conceivably you could receive the maximum for each one. The next question is striping and signage required for all street crossings? Are all quadrants of the street intersection needed to be reconstructed? In other words, if you have an intersection of two roads, do you have to treat all 4 crosswalks? Do you have to treat all 8 corners? And the answer is that might be project specific, and you should talk to your IDOT local district roads engineer. And I imagine that has a lot to do with the context of the roadways. And I think we're at our last one. Is there a list of previously awarded projects, both infrastructure and non-infrastructure? Yeah, that's a super helpful tool to have. Just looking through the list of, you know, what is being awarded and what is not. You know, if I'm thinking of doing something and it's nowhere on the list, never been funded before, I might want to, you know, check in and see, hey, I've never seen anything like this get a funding award before. Is it eligible, or is it just never come up? You know, that kind of thing. And also non-infrastructure, you won't find much in the way of non-infrastructure projects that have been funded, because previously very, very few folks ever applied for them, as well as in some years they have not even been haven't been eligible. So if you're looking for good examples of fundable non-infrastructure projects, I would once again go to those national resources or look at some of the resources on Active Transportation Alliance's website. I am now breathing. And let's see, seems, yep. And I think that's it. Maggie?
I think there was one more question about the grant application.
Okay, go for it. What is it?
And Kelly says the application form will be posted to their webpage shortly. So keep a lookout on the Safe Routes to School IDOT webpage. And then there was also a question, would a village-wide, citywide bike walk route plan be eligible? And I believe that the plan needs to really be focused on the schools, since it's the Safe Routes to School funding. So
right.
It couldn't just be for the entire community, but
no,
needs to zero into the schools.
Agreed. And there are examples of school travel plans. Again, I don't know if we have links to those on our website, but
we could create some. And
yeah, we have, Active Trans has done, geez, at least a dozen, maybe more, probably more. Actually, we've done several dozen school travel plans that are specifically, designed around not just engineering improvements, but all of the non-infrastructure stuff too. And that could give you a kind of an idea of the type of plan that might be a good guide for how to frame your proposal, if that's what you were after. So let's give it maybe another beat or two to see if there are any lingering questions. We encourage you to think up and list out as many questions as you might have between now and our next webinar in August, because we've got plenty of time to answer just about anything you want to know. And we might also bring some extra content to that webinar, especially on non-infrastructure programs, because they're lesser known. And we have a couple of experts in Illinois that know a lot about that. So we might bring those folks to the table to talk to you about what those might look like and what works and what doesn't. So counting down to closure, 5, 4, 3, last call, 2. Okay. Thank you everyone for being here. We really appreciated it and hope you got a lot out of it. And we will see you in August. Oh my gosh, I'm sorry. Here's the last slide with all the links, with Maggie's email address. Just take a screenshot real quick if you'd like. We will be, again, the recording will be available. The slides will be available on activetrans.org/SRTS. So if you have any questions, please reach out. Okay, thanks a lot. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.